There is an intensity when you watch Marizanne Kapp. She has this incredible talent, but backed by this ferocious work ethic and a fierce passion to win each moment. She has presence. You can feel it as she walks up to the crease, pulling her hair back before she's going to bowl. She runs in with a purpose, she hits the wicket harder than most women bowlers do, and she cannot handle fielding mistakes off her bowling, and of course, she moves the ball both ways. You add to that her batting, and she's not a bowler who bats, she's frontline in both skills. Perhaps in a better team she'd be sliding down the order a little bit, going in at number 5 or number 6. But South Africa haven't had enough talent for that, so she's often batting at 4 or even 3 for the national team. Again, she does it with this eerie stoicism. Almost like no matter what the situation, she has been there before and probably conquered it. Like there's something slightly boxy about her athleticism. She isn't fluid. Every step and shot seems mechanical, pre-planned and engineered. But it means that almost nothing ever goes wrong. She is so repeatable. And you see it in her stares, that when a catch is dropped or a fielder is in the wrong spot, she doesn't understand why the others have made a mistake. She's like a Terminator surrounded by humans. And when you look at Marizanne Kapp's eyes, you see someone coming for you. She is relentless. Her commitment to winning the next moment is extreme. She looks as professional as anyone in the sport, which is ironic because Marizanne Kapp is one of the last of the amateur era. Support us on Patreon and help us keep making our content. Join for exclusive perks like the AMAs, the live calls, and to chat with me directly on Discord. You can also enjoy ad-free content, early podcasts, and access to my emailer. Once upon a time, there was an all-rounder called Sheila Neft, who played for Western Province and was the first South African woman cricketer to take a hat-trick. During the 1953-54 season, Neft took 4 wickets in 4 deliveries, so a double hat-trick in some cultures. She helped her side win 3 titles on the trot. Her all-round game was so good that she averaged 43 with the bat in 19 first-class matches. With the ball, 88 wickets at an average of 8.7. She just was a phenomenal player. However, like most of her contemporaries, Neft spent her best years toiling on the club cricket scene where few people noticed or appreciated her talents. South African women barely ever played test matches, so she was a sundial in the shade. When she finally got the chance to play international cricket, she was well past her prime. She was in her 40s when England toured in 1960-61. In that series, she still chalked up 2 half-centuries and was South Africa's second highest run taker, and she picked up a couple of wickets. And one of those was Rachel Hayhoe Flint. It's more than just a normal wicket. Now, if Marizanne Kapp had known about Neft, she probably would have looked up to the all-rounder when she was growing up. However, she didn't. Like many of her peers, the only cricketers she saw were male, so when she was playing cricket in her backyard against her cousins, it was the men she was trying to emulate. In fact, she didn't even know that there was a South African women's team. So she grew up wanting to be Jacques Kallis. But in all honesty, Kapp is the sort of person who is just driven herself, and so she doesn't need heroes quite in the same way. She's a self-confessed former tomboy who also competed in friendly rugby matches with the boys and was just an all-round athlete at her school. However, it was cricket that really drove her, and that commitment to the sport and her obvious talent prompted her mother to approach the principal of the school and convince him to allow a 13-year-old girl to play against the boys. And at that stage, Marizanne was also playing indoor cricket against boys as well. A year after that move, Kapp had improved so much that her father would pick her up from school in the late afternoon and then take her down to St. George's Park. In 2004, the all-rounder was a member of the Eastern Province senior team at the age of 14. And she was usually the first person at training because her teammates would still be completing school runs or winding down at work or actually living adult lives. So instead of just hanging around waiting for everyone to turn up, Kapp spent that time alone working on her bowling. The teenager had designed a set of drills for herself. She would try and hit the stumps from different lengths, try cutters, and maintain a specific length when she wanted to. And when she felt that she had sent down enough deliveries, she would switch to target practice. No one in women's cricket in South Africa at that time was working as hard as she did. Most women would only come to practice when they actually had a spare moment. Kapp trained before the team got together, joined them in their sessions, and then went off to play indoor cricket after that. She made her List A debut in 2004, when she was still 14. The hours and hours she spent preparing on her own meant that she was over-prepared, especially when you look at the fact that she had trained so much in what was completely an amateur side. The men's team coaches would sometimes help out if they had a moment, and if an outside coach came in, they received a stipend from Cricket South Africa to help the women. And it was that little breadcrumb of coaching that really helped Marizanne Kapp go from her own plans to actually understanding exactly what she had to do as a professional athlete, even if she wasn't one. And because this was much more like club cricket than it was any sort of professional cricket, there was like anarchy across the batting order, which was often dictated by seniority. It was common for the star player to keep wicket, bowl 10 overs, and also bat in the top 6. So Kapp debuted at number 11. She faced 3 balls for her unbeaten 4 runs, and that was the end of her involvement for the game. They didn't actually get her to bowl a single delivery. In the next couple of games, she batted at number 6 and number 7, and didn't really bowl that much again. The following season, they decided that her bowling was good enough and she started to deliver a lot more balls. She got her maiden list A 5-wicket haul when she returned figures that read 6 wickets for 9 runs from 6.3 overs. At 17, Kapp knew that she wanted to pursue a career in cricket. Her mother disagreed because there was no actual career in cricket at that point. At that stage, they didn't have to pay for their kit or their travel or their accommodation, but it wasn't a job. The thing is that Marizanne's mum found out exactly what everyone else in cricket has found out. When Marizanne Kapp decides to do something, she does it. And that included her preparation. She was so strict about her own routines. She was dealing in processes before that even became a word in cricket. That Terminator-like focus came from repetition. From 2004 to 2008, Kapp sent down 1,000 deliveries and she took 48 wickets at an average of 15.9. That was enough to get her a call up for the South African team. Her batting was still developing, but she had quite a few runs with an average of 23 and a bunch of half centuries as well. But she also made a decision to change provinces. And remember, cricketers change first class setups all the time. Usually it's something to do with contracts or anything else. But of course, she was going from one amateur setup to another. But she went to play with Northerns because she thought it would make her a better player. And to be honest, she was right, because for the first time in her career, she was no longer the first person at the nets. She was now just one of a trio. Dane van Niekerk, who obviously is forever involved in the Marizanne Kapp story, and Mignon de Preza were also early arrivals at training. Unfortunately though, what had not changed was the facilities. She would turn up at an empty net like she did when she was 14. The difference is now that she could bowl to Van Niekerk and de Preza. And it turned out that, of course, those were 2 incredibly talented players. So again, her bowling took a huge leap just going up against them. Her batting, though, took a long time. We see this with a lot of really talented all-rounders. And you can see that because Marizanne Kapp was on her own, it was easy for her to develop her bowling and become so disciplined in hitting the top of off stump. It's much harder to bat on your own. And if you look at the 54 one-day internationals she played up until 2018, she was averaging 23.5, which was fine. In T20 cricket, she was struggling even more, averaging 14.9 and only striking at 90. But her stats in the last few years are what English cricketers would call different gravy. Since 2019, Kapp has featured in 2 test matches where she chalked up a huge ton and a 50 for her 298 runs and an average of 99.3. We're not saying she's Bradman, she's just below that. In ODI, she's got 950s and 200s with a 55 average. In T20 internationals, she's now averaging almost 25 and she's striking at 114. Domestically, she's been even more of a beast with the bat. And here's the important thing. What changes for Marizanne Kapp is that South Africa started hiring batting coaches for the women's team. It wasn't that the talent wasn't always in her. Quite clearly, she's always been this good. The difference is people could actually work with her on her game. One of those coaches was Kruger van Wyk, who you may remember because he played 9 test matches for New Zealand. And there's a really interesting quote that he has about Marizanne Kapp, where he talks about how much of a professional she is. And the interesting thing about that is that Kruger van Wyk is a cricketer who grew up as a male South African with access to all the professional systems. He then went to New Zealand, who also have really good professional systems. Everywhere he went, he had all this opportunity to improve his cricket. Marizanne Kapp did everything on her own for years. All she needed was the slightest little help from someone like Kruger van Wyk, and suddenly everything exploded. She was professional when there was no professionalism. I mean, according to Kapp, when she played for South Africa early on, they had a coach and a trainer who quite often would double as the physio, and sometimes they would also be the team manager. So Marizanne Kapp was a great player for South Africa, and arguably already maybe one of their greatest players at that point. And that is what happens when you add a system around someone. The issue, of course, is that she is no longer the fast bowler that she once was. Unfortunately, as her batting has got good, her bowling has started to tail off a little bit. At one stage, her and Shabnim Ismail were probably the most feared fast bowling combination in world cricket. But injuries and just general age, I mean, she's now been playing at the top level of cricket for 20 years, have slowed her down. But because she's so talented and smart and everything she does is so repeatable because of all those years of practice, it means that even the world's best batters still have to worry about what she's going to do. I mean, the fact that she can swing the ball both ways when she wants to is a huge advantage. But that is very different from Marizanne Kapp at her peak, who would beast batters. And South Africa was lucky that her bowling didn't need as much coaching, it just needed her own work ethic. But the batting clearly needed more. So that means they never really got the most out of Marizanne Kapp compared to someone like Jacques Kallis. Remember that Kallis was at the forefront of sports technology, of sports professionalism in South Africa. Bob Woolmer was literally experimenting with Jacques Kallis and how to make cricket better. So when we see Kallis in his mid-20s, he's already near that peak version of himself. And while that is all happening, the 14-year-old is bowling to a stump on her own. But in another way, South Africa is lucky to get Marizanne Kapp at all, because women's cricket was almost completely ignored when she was coming through as a youngster. We saw in the 90s that women's cricket starts to shift a little bit, and the Australian team is really good, and you also have Charlotte Edwards coming through in England, and then you have the New Zealand era coming. South Africa was kind of left behind. So yes, Marizanne Kapp could have been even better, and she could have ended up with a Kallis-like record. But of course, it could have been much worse, and she could have had a career a lot more like Neft. One thing you really see in women's cricket, and it also used to happen in men's cricket quite a lot, was that the players who went on to be absolutely fantastic in that amateur era were professionals. They weren't professionals in terms of being paid or being looked after or the systems around them or anything like that, but they had a professional mindset of how to get the best out of themselves. And there is absolutely no doubt that Marizanne Kapp is one of those players. But when you talk about her as a cricketer, we kind of see two versions of her. We see the amateur batter who just needed a lot more help to get to where she needed to be. And we see the professional bowler who certainly just made herself into that kind of a player by grit. But there is no doubt when you're looking at Marizanne Kapp now, you're looking at someone who is a thorough professional. And what's so wild about that is because she did start without proper coaching and without anyone else in the nets. She couldn't have come from a more amateur system. There is a part of me who's kind of upset that we never really got to see peak Marizanne Kapp because of the system that she came from. But part of me also thinks that young women now, whether they be watching in, Bangladesh or Pakistan or Australia or India, whether it be an international game or a franchise, whatever, when Marizanne Kapp is on the screen, you are seeing this incredible cricketer, this robotic athlete who is smart and talented and driven, and I suppose most importantly, professional in every single thing that she does. And so that means that the next 14-year-old talented girl has someone to look to now. But for Marizanne Kapp herself, she was a South African great as an amateur, but she always played like a professional. It was just that her sport took a long time to catch up. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.